All right, you probably heard these two questions in defining the status of the Roman Catholic Church. I think the first time that I read these two questions was in a book years ago by Geisler and Nix. And the two questions define the status of the Roman Catholic Church in terms of how evangelicals, how Christians, how Protestants would look at the Roman Catholic Church. The first view formed in a question is this: is the Roman Catholic Church a true church with significant error? Are they brothers and sisters in the Lord? Are they Christians, but have a lot of erroneous secondary doctrines? Or is the Roman Catholic Church a false church, non-Christian, with significant truths? In other words, although the Roman Catholic Church would affirm significant truths like the deity of Christ, Trinity, of course, the incarnation, the physical resurrection, the virgin birth, of course, they would reject justification through faith alone, which is the only recognized gospel. However, I have a third view, and I think this third view is better theologically. I mean, it's more definitive, and I think it really defines Roman Catholic Church as it actually is from a theological standpoint. And it's simply this: I find the Roman Catholic Church is a false church with absolutely no significant truths. So even though they would affirm the deity, they would affirm the Trinity and these other essential truths, they deny the cross work of Christ as the very ground of justification. So they separate, like the Judaizers did, they separate the person from the work. And you can't do that. Paul says that doctrine is anathema. That's exactly what the Judaizers did. They were as autosoteric as the Roman Catholic Church. They really are. So when a Roman Catholic Church mentions their affirmation, when they affirm the Trinity, they mention their affirmation on the deity of Christ, the physical resurrection, all these things. I say no, because you separate his work from the person, and biblically speaking, you can't do that, or you don't have Christ, because you're rejecting the very cross work of Christ. You're rejecting his person by rejecting his work. You cannot bifurcate these two doctrines. So they don't hold to the Trinity in a biblical sense, because they deny the second person of the Trinity by denying his work. They don't believe in the deity of Christ because they don't believe in that Christ, the two-natured person whose cross work was the very ground of justification. So what I want to do, there's 6 doctrines that I want to put up. These 6 doctrines are extremely heretical, and with crystal clarity, it shows the status of the Roman Catholic Church as a false church with no significant truths, as rejecting the incarnation, rejecting the cross work of Christ, the one-time sacrifice. But in our next presentation, I'm going to explicate some of the reasons. And I also want to present some official Roman Catholic doctrine or voices in the form of confessions and doctors of the church to show you that these 6 doctrines, most of which most Roman Catholics would agree to, but I want to show you this is official Roman Catholic theology. This is not a Protestant view or someone taking someone or something out of context. So I want to show you these 6 views or these 6 doctrines, and then in our next presentation, hopefully, or the next one after that, we'll go through these points again, but we'll add some detail and look at some of the horrible views and how detailed the Roman Catholic Church is in denying essential doctrines, and how idolatrous the Roman Catholic Church is. Because I want to give some documental evidence from official Roman Catholic sources, so you know it's not just some Protestant guy out there who, doesn't like the Roman Catholic Church. No, that's not the case at all. In fact, I admonish all Christians to pray for the Roman Catholic people, that God would deliver them from the darkness that they're in, and he would give them to the gospel of the Son, because right now they reject it. In terms of official Roman Catholic doctrine, they reject it. And I just want to qualify one thing. When I talk about the Roman Catholic Church, I'm talking about Rome's official view. I'm not talking about every single person who sits in a Roman Catholic Church, because just like in Protestant churches, you might have a lot of non-converts. You have a lot of folks that just don't understand doctrine, or they have such a distorted view of Christ, or they're not regenerated. So I'm sure in the Roman Catholic Church, you have the same thing. But official Roman Catholic doctrine is as heretical as any Muslim, as any Jehovah's Witness, as any Mormon, as heretical as oneness doctrine in terms of their rejection of Christ and his gospel. So I'm just going to put up these 6 points, and then in a future presentation, we'll go through the details of these points and not only cite Roman Catholic sources, but we'll contrast it with biblical doctrine. Living life as a Roman Catholic is a life of constant uncertainty before God as to the quantity of one's meritorious works. In other words, if you're a Roman Catholic, you never know if you're doing enough work, similar to the Mormon view. You know, saved after all you can do. Well, you don't know how much you can do. You don't know if you're doing enough works. Living life as a Roman Catholic is a life of, number 2, perpetual idolatry in giving Mary religious super-dulia, or they call hyper-dulia. Dulia is a word for service. And in the Bible, religious service is reserved for God alone. Exodus 20, verse 5. The Lord said, you shall not worship or serve any other. You shall not serve others in a religious context. Galatians 4:8, Paul says, dealing with pagan idolatry of the pre-converted Galatians. He says, formerly, when you did not know God, you were slaves or enslaved. It's from the Greek verb douleuo, where we get the noun douleia, where we get the Latin dulia, same thing, right? You were giving dulia. He says you were enslaved to those who by nature are not being gods. In other words, they were giving religious service to beings that weren't God by nature. Clearly, he's defining the pagan worship and the pagan idolatry that the pre-converted Galatians were, in which they were engaging. That's exactly what a Roman Catholic does. He gives Mary service, dulia, which is reserved for God alone in a religious context. And don't say it's not a religious context. When a Catholic goes to the Catholic Church and he gets on his knees and rubs his beads and looks at and prays to Mary, yeah, that's a religious context. It doesn't get more religious than that. They're giving something that's reserved for God alone. It's a functional worship. It's a serving worship. And they do it all day long. Number 3, living life as a Roman Catholic is a life of constant technical lusting for Mary in her attention, devotion, and veneration. The term lusting, as defined in the New Testament, epithumew. Epithumew is a term that means a strong or intense, a desire upon something. And their desire is upon Mary. And it's an unrighteous desire. It's a idolatrous desire for her attention, devotion, and veneration. That's lusting. Every day, it's a constant lust for Mary. Every single day as a Roman Catholic. Number 4, living life as a Roman Catholic is a life of rejecting, number 1, the incarnation of the Son by embracing the awful, heretical doctrine of transubstantiation, which implies that Jesus's body is ubiquitous. In other words, the priest at the Eucharist, at the communion, the priest has the power to ontologically change. It's an Thomas Aquinas said transubstantiation is an ontological change. It's not metaphorical, it's not figurative, it's ontological. The priest has the power to change the bread ontologically to the flesh of Christ, to change the wine ontologically to the blood of Christ. That means if you're taking communion as a Roman Catholic here, you're partaking in his literal flesh and blood, literally, not metaphorically, not spiritually, literally. But someone, millions perhaps, are doing the same thing around the globe. So that means the flesh of Christ is spread out all over the globe. That's a ubiquitous body, antithetical to the New Testament presentation of the incarnation, where God the Son becomes truly man. The Word became flesh. He did not become Superman, where his body's ubiquitous, or a hyper-flesh, where it's spread out all over the earth. He did not become an X-Man, some bizarre flesh that's capable of being ubiquitous. No, the Bible presents that the Son of God, God the Son, became truly man, and truly man is not an X-Man. Truly man is not ubiquitous. Our flesh is not ubiquitous. Neither is Christ. That's the worst kind of rejection, I think. It's a deformation of the incarnation. It's an ontological change. And number two, within the transubstantiation, Roman Catholics living life as a Roman Catholic is a rejection of the one-time atoning sacrifice of Christ, the sacrificial cross work of Christ for sin. It rejects the one-time sacrifice. For example, because it's representing him. For example, in the Catechism, I wrote one example. We have examples abounding in the Catechism of the Catholic Church, paragraph 1366, and also 1367. These are just two examples of dozens and dozens saying the same thing. The Eucharist is, notice it says is, present tense, every time you do it, thus a sacrifice. The Eucharist is a sacrifice. Why? Because it represents, these are my words, present and ongoing. It represents the sacrifice of the cross. And they say in paragraph 1367, the Eucharist is truly propitiatory. Really, every time you do it, it's a propitiation. It's a propitiation. It's a representation of the sacrifice. So living life as a Roman Catholic, not only are you rejecting the incarnation, you're rejecting the one-time cross work of Christ. Living life as a Roman Catholic is a life, number 5, of rejecting the person of Christ, as mentioned, by rejecting his cross work as the very ground of justification. Justification through faith alone is the only recognized gospel. And number 6, living life as a Roman Catholic really is living life with absolutely no assurance of justification. You have no assurance that you're going to stay saved. Absolutely not. You can lose it. You can forfeit it by lack of performance. It's based on the Catholic. If you're a Roman Catholic, your salvation, your status is based on your meritorious works and not on God, because he just can't keep you. No assurance of justification in this life, nor no assurance in glorification in the afterlife. So I just wanted to present these 6 points and show you how heretical and dark the Roman Catholic Church is. And we will look at the details of these 6 points and quote Roman Catholic official sources and contrast it with biblical doctrine exegetically. And the whole objective to this is so we as Christians not only will educate ourselves on foundational Roman Catholic doctrines, but it will enable us and equip us to reach out evangelistically to Roman Catholics and present and affirm not just apologetics, but confirmation of the only recognized gospel and doctrines like the incarnation. So we will look at the details of these 6 points next time. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel so you'll get the notifications. And we will see you next time when we go through these details of these 6 points. There's many more points, but I want to focus on these 6. So we'll end it here and look for the next video. Also visit the website, christiandefense.org.